about here. I had one person I neglected to introduce, and that's Ted Morrison, who's doing she had a traditional scientist's life, from everything I can tell, very into science and kind of eliminating the spiritual aspects of things. And she was very successful. She was a fellow with the National Institute of Health and the National, I forgot the first word, for science, the advancement of science, American Association for Advancement of Science. And she's spoken many times in New Mexico at the Science and Consciousness, at the Science and Consciousness seminars, conferences. She's been on Good Morning America. She's been on Art Bell. She's been on in a lot of wonderful places. She's very well respected as a healer. I can tell you I'll tell you about Kim. When Kimberly Clark Sharp was our speaker a couple of years ago, she will be coming back in September as our speaker again. And Kim has had an outstanding near-death experience. She wrote a book about it called After the Light. And in After the Light, she talks about two of her experiences with Joyce, who was a friend of hers, and because of her near-death experiences, had been coming to Seattle Ions. Kim had a mastectomy. She had breast cancer, and page 221 in the book. And she came home, and they catch you up with all kinds of drains and stuff to drain the lymph fluid, and it usually drains clear. And while Kim after she got home from the hospital, it started bleeding red. And she didn't realize how serious this was. She called her surgeon, and the surgeon wasn't available, and so she didn't bother to tell them anything else. She just let it go. And she was sitting there bleeding, and Joyce happened to stop by, and Kim said she was sitting on the bed, and she said, she saw what was going on, and she said, I can help you, but you have to ask me. And so Kim asked her, and she put her hands on her, and they watched the blood change to clear again. And there have been many other wonderful things that will happen. She'll tell you all the details about her experience, which was an amazing experience where her skull was crushed and she died. And she came back, and for the last 15 years has been traveling around studying healers and doing healings herself. It's a very wonderful story, and she has beautiful slides for us. It's a spectacular, wonderful thing that we just happened to have. I know it wasn't planned. I know we've been gifted. So let's give a warm welcome to Joyce Hobbs.
Truly a delight to be here. We'll try and work with this mic so that you can hear it all. And I want to thank Diane and Seattle Ions. Diane has been the most gracious hostess, and I know that you appreciate what she has done personally to pull this group together. It's pretty amazing. Seattle Ions is very old and has been around a long time, and the meetings are not as hot as this, I can tell you that. I'm going to dim the lights so we can see the slides. Hopefully I will get the right button. Slides. What else about the lights? A couple of things I want to tell you. Yes, all the pictures are ones that I've taken. And some of them are from, many of them are from different travels. Here she comes. I did my Ph.D. work at Penn State University at the height of the time when molecular biology was the hot thing, and we had a really exciting lab. I went from there to a primate research center on a postdoc as a fellow with the National Institutes of Health. My work was on the effects of pollution on fish eventually. I was very fortunate. I published a lot of papers. I've traveled internationally in my work. You see me a long time ago at the electron microscope on the left. The electron microscope weighs over a ton. It magnifies up to 1,000,000 times. It's an incredible instrument. You feel like you're flying a spaceship sitting at this thing. And you're actually peering inside of cells. You look to the very inner workings of life. And I loved it. I had no desire to change careers. Things were going really swimmingly well. I had no interest in spirituality. I was dedicated to understanding the secrets of life through scientific means. On the other side of the screen, you see an electron micrograph, a picture of the inside of the cell. Down near the bottom, this is highly magnified. Probably about 50,000 magnifications just on the slide. By the time you get on the screen, it's up another notch from there. But you're peering at the nucleus down near the bottom, just a very tiny crest of it, a tiny portion of it. This is where all of the codes of life are kept in every single cell. Right above it are two little sort of ellipsoid dark objects. Those are called mitochondria, and they are the powerhouse of the cell. They're the furnace of the cell. Without their work, there would be no energy for life whatsoever. And then all the squiggly lines up above that are called endoplasmic reticulum, and they have little bumps on them called ribosomes. This is where everything that's protein is made in your body. All the enzymes that moderate all of the biochemistry that keeps you alive. All of the proteins that are the structure of the soft tissue of your body. Your muscles, connective tissue. All of it's made there. It's this manufacturing area. These three parts of the cell are very basic, obviously, and important to your life. We'll talk more about those later and how to reach them with healing energy and with consciousness for healing. These are muscle fibers in an embryonic fish that are developing. You can see the exquisite beauty and order of the inside of the cell. We are created in a magnificent way. I always think of the body as God stuff. We're made of God stuff. And as you look deeper and deeper inside, I have found more and more amazement at the universe within the cell and its exquisite creative beauty. So in the middle of this really fine career and being quite satisfied with my life, having never heard of near-death experiences, this was in the late 70s, I had an intense experience and went down a long dark tunnel. Now the picture here is an electron micrograph with a scanning microscope of octopus tentacles in an embryonic octopus, a very baby one. But they don't look unlike the tunnel, the famous tunnel. Let me tell you a little bit about that experience. I was at home and I had a leaded glass window about so big, maybe 3 feet long and 1.5 wide. It was encased in oak, very heavy. It sat on the mantle of my fireplace, and the thing had never budged for years. It was stable sitting there. And I was mistakenly cleaning house. I think the real message was, cleaning house is really a bad thing to do. I was vacuuming in front of the fireplace, but I know I did not bump the mantle. And this thing just vaulted off and whacked me on the head. I saw it falling toward me, and then felt it hit, and that was it. from that point, phew, I was whizzing down a long dark tunnel towards the light very fast. So fast you couldn't be afraid. And at the entrance to the place of light, my mother and grandmother greeted me. My mother on the, well, you can tell the difference. Both of these women had been dead for some years. I missed them terribly. I was very close to both my mom and grandma. And I had no belief in an afterlife. So to see them there greeting me, communicating with me, and sending such profound love to me was just incredible. I stayed there for a fairly short time, for a long time. You know, time just loses its dimension over there. And then I passed into a place of light that was, here we go, exquisitely beautiful. There were skies and rolling hills, and everything felt like it was lit from itself. The grass emitted light itself, and the colors were like laser colors, not harsh or unpleasant, but absolutely pure and totally clear. I can still see in my mind the quality of the color that was there. And then I was in the presence of a being of light, which seemed like for a very long time. I did not have a light review, but I had the sense that there were no secrets, everything was known, and there was no judgment whatsoever. It's a place, as others of you I know have spoken, that you never want to leave. You have no desire to do anything or go anywhere, but to bathe in that incredible sense of peace and expression of love towards you. At some point, I wound up back on the floor with a large gash on my head, and the blood around the gash was dry. Now, most time with a head injury, you're gone for a very short time, a minute or less. It's been difficult for me to restructure how long I was out, but I was out quite a while, probably at least an hour. And what I've always felt was that I was rewired when I was over there. I had no knowledge when I came back of any gift or anything different other than a really wonky experience. But it was so complex, and this slide speaks to me to share with you the sense of interweaving of many lifetimes, of individuals that we meet, places that we go, things we know and don't know, but this incredible interlocking, interwoven reality that forms our reality, our lifetime. Need to throw something funny in here. Discovering that the light at the end of the tunnel is New Jersey. You turn around and go back too, right? So here's some of the events of my life. My Ph.D. was completed in 71, my near-death experience in 77. My daughter was born in 1978. Quite a miracle. I was told that I was not fertile, and all of a sudden, surprisingly, I was pregnant. And she is now quite a fabulous young woman. In 1984 is when I changed careers. I had no desire to become a healer or do anything strange and wonderful. I was very happy as a scientist. But I couldn't escape the near-death experience. I couldn't discount it. After my head began to heal and I was up and around, I'd gone down to a bookstore in Seattle, and Ray Moody's book was the first one out, and the thing literally jumped off the shelf into my hands. And I stood in the bookstore and read the whole thing. Now, one of the things that I always said in the laboratory was, if it's real, it's repeatable. Let's do that experiment again and see if our data is accurate. So here I'm looking at a book with story after story of near-death experiences that are similar to mine. Not exactly the same, but very similar. So all of a sudden I had to really deal with this. And then I ran into a healer in Seattle, began meditating and taking classes in healing. And all of a sudden I had some very ecstatic experiences where my body got red hot, my hands felt like they were 3 feet wide, and people started feeding back to me all sorts of things that were happening to them when I was doing my stuff. This was intriguing to me, but I still had no desire to leave science. I thought, well, it's a nice avocation, something I can contribute, but my job in the world is being a scientist. 4 of us had gone down to Mount Shasta, and we bivouacked in the snow and hiked to 9,600 feet, and we'd seen what looked like UFOs, and I mean, it was just a wild experience for me. And on the way back, we stopped at a shrine outside of Portland, Oregon, and I knelt in front of a huge grotto which contained a replica of the Pieta. I grew up Protestant, not Catholic, but I went up and knelt in front of this place, and I heard a woman's voice say, "You are called to heal." It was so powerful. It was exactly like the emotions of the near-death experience. It was full of peace, full of love, but the power of the energy was such that I could not resist it. I went back and resigned my position and started. It took me a couple months to train somebody to run the lab, but that was the pivotal point of leaving as a healer. I began to have visionary experiences, direct communication about what to do when clients came. I became aware of several guides that would come to instruct me, and I thought, well, this is cool. All I have to do is just sort of give them my hands, and they'll do it. And they said, oh, no, we'll show you once, and then you know. But I've always had and always worked through an energy beyond myself, a universal energy of healing, and had wonderful instruction directly as the work has progressed. So, changing careers to healing was in 1984. I decided to go back and get a master's in pastoral ministry from Seattle University because I thought it'd be nice to know more about Western theology, knew a lot about Eastern theology, and had done a lot of work there. And also to have some sort of umbrella for the work, but ultimately you really don't need any. And then in last year, 2002, Art Bell invited me to be on the show for 3 hours. He interviewed me and changed my practice significantly. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls and emails. And I had already developed a way of working at a distance over the phone with people because I had clients from Seattle who moved out of state. So we had wonderful experiences. They felt like the healing work was just like it was in the healing room. So that was in place by the time this happened, and I'm still extraordinarily busy with the folks from there. And then I put CI up here because there's something about this trip that is also pivotal. So Chicago, Illinois in 2003, there's something about this too. Now, how does a scientist go about becoming a healer? I'm a really strong bullshit detector. I'm a really strong critic that lives in me. I'm a really strong non-believer. So I read books on healing and I go, well, does that fit with what cells do? Does that fit with how at least the pieces of things we know about actually work? So I had, as you can imagine, a lot of struggle trying to learn this new career. I worked for a while as a healer, and then I went to the Philippines, pure guidance. And I spent 2.5 months there working with a native healer. I sponsored he and his wife and brought them to Seattle. This is up on Mount Rainier. My daughter was a little girl, but look at that picture. My friend was just clicking simple shots and caught this. The shots before had nothing like this in it. This has not been doctored in any way. Roberto's hand is on the back of my daughter, but look at the beam of light coming out of her either 6th or 7th chakra. Look at his left hand, that's not a snowball. This man reads his left hand in discerning what's wrong in the body. He looks at it and he mumbles and he gets information by looking at his hand. Now, I've stared at my left hand for a year and that doesn't do it for me. I have a way of opening the body and looking inside. I can read the body that way. But to me, this is just an extraordinary sort of punctuation point, something that is out of the ordinary, and we all ask for signs from time to time. Am I on the right track? What is this all about? What I learned in the Philippines was how to read the body. He would have clients come in, they would speak only Tagalog. They would not speak any English. And he would turn to me and say, "What's wrong with this person?" And I'd go, "Ah!" Eventually I began to really see inside the body, and I could read better and better and better. Plus, we did tons of meditation, which was really an underpinning for the work at this point. So the first big learning in shifting into being a healer was, how do you know what you're working on? Where are the key points that need to be touched? What is it that you're guided to do? Then I came back and worked for a year or two. Had a strong nudge to go to India. And I spent a month in South India, from Bangalore clear to the southern tip of India. Spent 2 weeks at Sai Baba's ashram, which was really an interesting experience. There's lots of information about what a fine healer he is. I did not see any of that directly. I appreciated what he is doing in India. But I think in this new age, the consciousness of healing is within each of us, and that to awaken that is our job, not to find gurus to follow. But I toured South India, and when I came back, I discovered there were just 4 of us. My daughter, who was 2nd grade then, a friend of mine and her husband. We rented a car and driver and drove clear to the southern tip of India and up the coast and over the mountains of Uttamundi, and rode on an elephant in the forest in the morning and had some fabulous experiences. But when I came back and I started looking at where we'd stopped, we had been guided and stopped at every one of the pilgrimage temples in South India. And it was an incredible shift inside, and another level of healing energy and way of working came to me. I never come back from these trips trying to replicate what's going on in that place, but to take the principles of what I learned and apply those to the work. Because a lot of the work in other cultures does not translate culturally here. Then I went to Bali in 1990, and I've been back 6 times, worked with 2 healers. This is the first one, Jiro Tapakan. She came to her work through a near-death experience. All of the healers who are not in a lineage of healing, who do not learn it from their parent, come to their work after a near-death experience. That's what attracted me there in the first place. Jiro Tapakan is a title. Jiro means master healer. Tapakan is the kind of healing she does. She's a trance medium. She was very ill on death's door and went out of body. Her experience was not a tunnel, however. She was walking in a forest down a path. She came to a crossroads, and at the crossroads was a huge desk, like a tribunal, and she was being judged whether she was to die or live. And a brother came to plead her case. And bingo, she was back in her body. She had been gone so long that her family had begun the ceremonies of death and were all weeping and trying to get things ready for her funeral. It was amazing she survived. She has been a healer. She's now pushing 80. She's been a healer for 6 decades, and she's really incredible. On the other side of the slide is a picture of Basaki, which is the mother temple. It is dedicated to Shiva. And the parasols in front indicate a ceremony going on. When you go up the steps and through the gate, you go first through a split gate, which means you have entered the temple, but you're still partly secular and partly spiritual. And then you go inside, cleanse your hands, and you go through another gate that's closed. And that indicates you've entered the realm of the divine and you are in a holy place. This is the second healer that I connected with. Her name is Jiro, Master Healer Manku Shrikandi. She does incredible trance work. And what I learned in Bali was how to navigate the trance world safely for healing. How to go into a state similar to a near-death experience. Create that energy for people and bring whatever healing they need, if it's emotional, physical, whatever it is, to them at that place. When I was there, the last trip was in 2000. She had completed 20 years of work and was undergoing this amazing experience where she went into a deep trance and flopped over like dead. Now, I've done a lot of work in hospitals. I'm often called to work with families when someone is dying. And I know what a body looks like when there's still a spirit there, even if the person is in a coma, and when they're dead. She looked dead. And the priests of the village picked her up and carried her up on their arms around, out of her little private temple. She was out for probably 10 minutes and then started coming back. In that time, the village people had put holy water over her and flowers strewn all over her. She believed, their belief is that God then revitalized her body. She gave up her life, but God restored it, and so that she was filled by, and for her that would be Shiva energy at that time. I don't have it, usually often show a slide that shows her just coming back. Her eyes indicate she is so deeply entranced still. And then she danced. She has really long hair. It's down almost the back of her knees. And so she sprinkled holy water, sent flowers, touched everybody in the group. It was quite an incredible experience. I was just coming up on completing 20 years as a healer. And so about a week later, she performed a similar ritual for me. Now, what had happened in those previous 10 years with her is I would go over, she would take me off to a temple, she would sit me in the hot sand and start whacking me around. She would go into trance, chant and dance, and then come up and just haul off and hit me on the shoulder. It never made me mad, but it sure would in this culture if somebody did that. And then she would ask, "What do you see?" I had no idea what I was supposed to see or anything else about it. And what happened each time is that I was given the vision of the guides of the temple or some significant aspect of that particular temple. So I had to pass each of these tests, and then that was done. And so I did rounds of these, or 4 or 5 every single trip. One of those, I lost my body completely. I turned into a tiny dot of blue light. I had no sense of my body whatsoever. And the experience was similar to a near-death experience. Again, the feelings of pure connection with the divine, of the light, and of raising the energy, shifting the information, being able then to do more healing happened each time. What happened when I came back then was incredible results in the healing room, just each time going up. One of the questions that's bothered me for a long time that I'm quite interested in is, why do near-death experiences lead to healing? And I call this the dragonfly effect. This is a picture of a dragonfly that I took actually in the Philippines. It was the guardian of a hot spring that I went to frequently. And I learned from a native person to be able to stick my finger up and call the dragonfly, and it would come and sit on my finger. That was just worth the whole trip to the Philippines. That was so cool. But dragonflies, unlike butterflies, once they hatch, can molt and hatch again, or molt and keep living. A butterfly hatches, spreads its wings out, mates, lays its eggs, and it's done. And it's been a symbol of transformation in past decades. But the dragonfly, once it hatches, can live for several seasons by molting, by changing. I think in one lifetime, most people are actually running through several levels of consciousness. And rather than just dying and coming back, they are increasing their consciousness. So somebody has a near-death experience and suddenly changes careers, has a profound change in what they do. I think that is a dragonfly effect. The other piece about near-death experiences is that loss of fear, that you can go anywhere, look into any darkness, and you know that you're safe in the light. So this wonderful quote, "What is meant by light? To gaze with undimmed eyes on all darkness," is another aspect of the loss of fear that allows you as a healer to participate with anyone in any stage of their life with anything that's going on. This one is a sunrise in Valley. And I want to shift gears a little bit now and show you how to move healing energy to a cell level. Your body has 70 trillion cells. The nearest galaxy has 100 billion stars. If you do the math, you'll find out that your body has 700 galaxies worth of stars in it. 70 trillion cells is enormous. And those are being renewed and replenished all the time. In those 70 trillion cells, there's 25 trillion red blood cells that carry oxygen to all your tissues. Red blood cells only live for about a month. Then they die and they're cleaned up by the spleen. Every single second, there's 3 million new red blood cells made in your body. Your body is an incredible natural healer. That's the way you were created. Healing occurs in the manner of creation, cell by cell, coursing through the molecules, stirring the waters to life. The deep, deep healing work reaches the cells. It's the only part of the body that can actually make the change to make anything better. So, up in the higher part of this slide, on your left, is a very high magnification of a junction between cells. These are like the zippers that hold your cells together. The little tiny fibers there between every cell. Have you ever wondered why when you press on your skin it doesn't just fall apart? It's because of these little desmosomes between every one of those 70 trillion cells that hold them together. And down on the right side is a scanning electron microgram of an egg being fertilized by sperm. We took months to get this picture. The egg, this is a fish egg, and it only has one spot it can be fertilized. That little thing, it's called a micropod. So the sperm have to figure out how to get there. The egg would be almost as big as this. The egg would be as big as this room, and another story high. That's the size parameters for looking at this tiny little micropod, smaller than a pin dot. It is amazing that we all start from one sperm and one egg, and we grow into this amazing 70 trillion cell conglomerate that all pretty much works together most of the time. Now, up on the top is a picture of the surface of a normal cell. This happens to be of a fish, but look how exquisitely beautiful and organized it is. Down at the very bottom is the picture of a infected fish that has a bacterial infection where the skin has been eroded. And then off to the side of that is a close-up of the bacteria. When you have an infection, you can have wall-to-wall bacteria, as this shows. These are two sick cells. The one with the black in it, those are viruses. They're very small and they're inside of the cell, living off of the cell until they decide to just blow it apart and go find another cell. So when you have the flu and you have a fever, when your fever peaks, the virus have been released. And then they're hunting for another cell, they settle in, things calm down a little bit, and then they burst forth again. The other picture is of cells in the eye of a fish again, exposed to PCBs. And you see all those little white holes. These are where the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, should have been, and they were just totally blasted. Everything else in the cell was healthy and normal, but one part of the cell, the powerhouse, was damaged, and the cell will die eventually. When you're doing healing work, either on yourself or with another, there will be times when you're drawn to the power pack of the cell, to the information of the cell. If you have something that's a genetic problem, you're going to be working deep in the nucleus at the information level of the cell. If your body is producing stuff it's miscoding for, you may be drawn to the place where the proteins are made. Or if there's a disease in which you're just totally out of energy and cells are dying, you're going to be drawn to the power pack of the cell. Here's that same picture that I showed early on with each of the parts labeled. One of the things that has worked incredibly well for me is to work with the universal spiral. All the galaxies most all the galaxies we know about through the Hubble telescope are spiral in nature. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is a spiral, and we're sitting out on one little tiny arm of it. The patterns of nature are huge, full of lots of energy, and they're often in spirals. All three of the main functions of the cell operate by spiraling. The protein is spun off of the ribosome. The enzyme in the mitochondria that keeps you alive, keeps energy in your body, spins when it does its work. That was only discovered in 1998. It's published in the journal Science. The nucleus is a famous, well-known spiral arrangement. So if you connect with the universal spiral in your meditation or your imagery, and then pull that down inside of your body, into your cells, it's been extremely effective for healing. This is a poem from Tagore that I really like, and the picture is my backyard. I have a little cabin up in the mountains of northern Washington, very near the Canadian border. In the mountains, stillness surges up to explore its own height. In the lake, movement stands still to contemplate its own depth. What I'd like to do is take a moment with you to experience the link and connection of both height and depth, and working with the spirals if you would like. So if you just kind of get in your spot and relax and close your eyes, let me talk you through a brief healing meditation. Think for a moment about these huge energy reserves in the universe. The The universe, the source, God, has enough healing energy for everyone. You do not rob anything from anybody by accepting and receiving healing. And if it works for you, just think about a beautiful spiral of light surrounding you, giving you a very safe place to be. Open yourself to the possibility of those universal flow of energies to reach inside yourselves, to reach the energy source within yourselves. Enhance it, support it. Now think about those spirals of energy touching the information centers, the DNA, shifting any information that's not healthy for you, that doesn't support your life, to information that supports your life. Allowing each cell to become healthy, functioning fully, and again, allow that marvelous energy of healing to touch all the parts in you that make enzymes and protein structures, enhancing life and vitality. Allow yourself to invite your higher consciousness to fill your body, to be fully present in your physical form, enlivening the God stuff you're made of, active in the magnificent world within yourselves. let yourself come back to this space. Smooth. Back at Mount Shuksan. This slide, I want to encourage you and challenge you to be the bright spot of light, the cluster of light and brightness that each of these little, they're actually weeds, but that doesn't matter, they're pretty anyway. Each of these little seed pods is. All of us together make a difference working with each other. Think of yourself as that incredible bright light in your own life, your own circle. And with that, I'm going to close and open for questions. Get the lights on. Okay, I bet there's some questions.
You had a slide up there that was asking the question, what is it about the NDE that engenders this ability to heal when you return? Can you say more about that?
As far as I know, there's about a third of the people who come back from an NDE who have some gift of healing. Whether or not it's just the awareness of a possibility, the awareness of the action of love, and the shift of consciousness from the experience. Those are pieces of it that I think are awareness pieces. The energy changes when you're there, and the energy changes when you meditate. The energy changes when you're inspired. The energy changes through tons of ways spiritually outside of near-death experiences. That connects with the natural tendency of the body to heal. If you're pumping 3 million new red blood cells every single second you're sitting here, your body is a healing entity. And so as you become more and more aware of your spiritual self and of the energies that course through you, that natural healing ability, I think, can become engaged and given to another. I also think that learning to navigate the trance state safely, which people do, I believe, through a near-death experience, supports the gift of healing. It opens the ability to see things that are not in necessarily solid, what one would call ordinary reality. Let me illustrate with something from the Native American culture that I learned from Brooke Medicine Eagle. She speaks of thinking of a line down in front of you, right from your center, and to the left is the world of spirit, and to the right the world of ordinary reality. When you step over into the world of spirit, just a little ways, not clear out into samadhi or into total bliss, but just a little ways into that world, and you stand there with great clarity, and then you weave back into the ordinary reality. You can manifest and make things happen that are astonishing. And so the NDE allows you somehow or other that access to being able to weave from this extraordinary state into ordinary reality, and through that to create even physical healing. It's not so hard to think about being forgiven, having emotional bumps and things removed by belief changes and by realizations. But what about these very frank physical things? I've seen the most amazing physical healings. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, you're doing great.
All right. I had a woman come to my office once, and her psychotherapist had sent her. Her colon was bleeding. She was a young woman. She wasn't even 30 years old yet. She was facing a colostomy within days. She did not want to be there. But she didn't have much choice there. I mean, she was running out of options. She was soon to have this very radical surgery. Now, most of us believe as healers that it really helps if our clients want to be there and they believe in what we're doing. And I've had many experiences where that is not a requirement. It helps, but it's not a requirement. So most people tend to develop a sense of ease, relaxation, and trust pretty fast with me in the office. And I talk with people and then I have a table and just have them stretch out and I do my stuff, do sort of energy work with my hands. My hands get really hot like yours do and all that stuff. Well, I invited her to lay down on the table. And I've never been with anybody like that. She laid down and she was... And I thought, oh my goodness, I've wasted her time. And I felt really badly about it. I got a call 2 days later. That night, the bleeding had stopped. It never returned. She did not have to have a colostomy. She continued to work with me for probably 6 months, and all of the symptoms of colitis disappeared and stabilized. She looked me up 10 years after this, and I hadn't heard anything from her, except a couple years after I hadn't seen her, I got a birth announcement. She had been able to conceive, carry, and give birth to a child, which was really the payoff. That was exciting. And then she looked me up now about 3 years ago, and some of the symptoms had just begun to return, and she wanted some more work. And she said she still was not real comfortable. She said, it always feels so weird, filled with stuff going on inside, and it just feels so strange, and then it all gets better, and it's all well, and so on and so forth. So there are times when the healing is so miraculous and profound, and other times where it's slow, or for one reason or another it doesn't happen. And I've certainly been there and seen it all. One of the beliefs I have is that there'll be people along the way for anyone who help lay the groundwork for healing. And every once in a while, one of us gets to put the frosting on the cake and we think we've just done it all, and we haven't.
It seems to me that the decision to go home or to make a transition is at a soul level. And so the consciousness may not even be aware of it. But I'm wondering also about the shades of Ruth Montgomery. Walk-ins.
Right. That's a really good question. Because when I first, after my experience, and I was reading everything I could get my hands on, I read Ruth Montgomery. And I thought, oh, this is cool, I'm a walk-in. This explains it all. But it didn't. And I don't think we need, I mean, there may be walk-ins, there certainly may be, but I don't think we have to go to a complicated explanation to say that being more fully human and who we are, more fully our soul level, our highest good in our bodies, is very different than the way we were before. So I don't think all MDEs, or who knows what if there is a percentage, get to be how they are because they've suddenly become walk-ins. And it's one of those areas, like a lot of this sort of more esoteric stuff, that you really can't prove. And there is still a scientist alive and well in me that says, well, let's see, how far do we need to stretch this or make an explanation grow to prove it? I don't know. Nobody knows. But it's an interesting idea. That you could drop dead, somebody else take over and run the rest of your life. Some days that would really be nice. And yet, the incredible level of you grasping like who you really are and living that is astonishingly powerful, I think.
It's amazing to me that you did not fight this at all. You didn't need a cosmic 2x4 to say, I'm going to be a scientist, and that is that. I mean, it's almost as if you knew that you knew.
Oh, I mean, early on, when I became a scientist?
No, after your experience. I mean, there was no, well, I'm going to stay with this, you know.
Well, I was a scientist before the experience, and it did take a 2x4 to get me into healing.
Okay.
And I thought when I left my scientific career in 1984 that, you know, so why did I become a scientist? And I loved doing electron microscopy. I ran a lab with, I had 5 people working for me and published papers, 4 or 5 papers every year, and ran around the world. I was really enjoying it. There was no reason to leave it other than this calling. And I thought, so if this is what I was supposed to be, you know, then why did I go to do all that hard work? Now the two come together, and it's really clear to me why I did. It makes a lot of sense. Been trying to get a book out, and I get really busy with clients, and the book gets on the back burner, of what it's like to put these together and to work at a cell level with information about it. So maybe one of those days that'll be available, but it makes perfect sense why they go together now. For one thing, I'm able to work really deeply in the body, and I truly believe that the deeper you get, the more profound the healing.
This healing energy, have there been any scientific studies to define it, to identify it? They've worked with all the world, I know, but are you aware of any special studies that have touched on it?
There are some, and there are some right now that the National Institutes of Health are actually funding presently. There's a whole cluster of them probably 20 years ago. Some wonderful work with Thelma Moss and cancer cells called HeLa cells growing in culture, and when she put her hands around them, the cancer cells would curl up and release. They come out of the culture, and they needed those little roots to be able to do their dirty work. So there were some simple, nice, straightforward experiments. Bill Tiller, who was at Stanford, has done a lot of wonderful theoretical work. He has some books out. If you go to the website for the Science and Consciousness conferences, you can pick up some of the information about stuff that's going on right now. Dean Radin is doing interesting psychic experiments. There's nothing that I know of funded at the moment specifically about healing energy, but all of these peripheral things that are involved, like ability to read and move things that shouldn't be moved or that you couldn't otherwise, are happening. And that website is bizspirit, B-I-Z, spirit.com. NIH also, there's now not just a study section, but a whole, it wasn't focused, no, I can't remember the title, but NIH has moved a whole section under the aegis of alternative healing. And at first they were doing mostly studies on acupuncture and this and that. Now they're also expanding and funding work on healing energy.
Can you tell when working with a client that they're not going to be healed, that they're not meant to be healed?
Yeah, it's a good question. She asked, when I'm working on a client, can I tell if they're not supposed to or not going to be healed? It's a difficult question. Let me back up just a little bit. I have, for a very long time, had a certain prayer about my work, because I've never advertised. The prayer has been, may the people I can help find me. And they do. So I'm not working with a random population. I'm working with people who are guided. And my belief is, if they wind up there, I can help them in some way. So I'm not reading for, can I help them or not? That's kind of like already the setup. There are people that can't be healed. There are people that you work on, they get better, and then bingo, they're sick again. And I really leave it up to the individual. I don't try and intervene with that. I do what I'm guided to do, and it's still in their hands. I do a lot of teaching in my work, so I try and work with individuals as to how to work with spiral energy, how to access healing energy for themselves. A strong belief that every one of us are healers, and some of us are appointed as teachers or to bring up the consciousness of it. There are times when people are ready to go. They just, I had, sitting in the airport in Seattle before I got on the plane to come here, had a call from someone in Vancouver, British Columbia, who said, I have this friend, we've just come back from the Philippines, he's worked with a Philippine healer, he's suddenly really going downhill, and I want you to work on him. And I'm going, well, I'm leaving for Chicago. I will, in my morning meditations, send energy to him for the next 3 or 4 days. And just sitting there in the airport, what I got is, this man's tired, done, and wants out. And so a huge effort to try to keep him here is not appropriate. So yes and no. You see, I got a message, and I relayed that to his friend, and I said, I need to tell you that sometimes this work in bringing healing energy to somebody doesn't cure them, but it actually helps them move faster to the other side. And that may be what your friend needs. I don't know. I am not God. I don't call it. But that's the feel I had around this man. And so when that happens, I'll be totally honest and tell people that. But I don't, in the practice, say, well, you're not going to get well because yada, yada, yada. Or, oh, you're so lucky you're one that's going to get well. You know, every one of you who work within this field, you know there are times when you get a prompting of a message where you must tell the truth as you see it, and yet you can't step ahead and operate that out of your ego, like, well, I know what's good for you or whatever. So that's kind of a lot of the yes and no and this side and that side of that question. It's a difficult question. It's an authority question. It's a good one. Thank you.
My sister has severe mental illness and she's on lots of psychometric drugs. And how would you, have you ever, I'm sure you have, but how would you deal with someone like that? Because if they're getting better, you believe they're getting better, and if they start to go off their drugs, that could, how do you handle it?
I never ask people to stop taking their medication for anything, ever. What I ask them to do is work with their physician. In something like that where someone else is monitoring your sister, then it's a team approach where someone has got to see, is this person better? Can we measure it in some way? And that's one of the places in Seattle where I integrate with the medical system quite a lot, and I've had very good luck with it. Oftentimes there'll be some kind of marker so the person is getting better. Either they will know or their physician will know, and then they can modify and adjust their medication. For example, I worked with somebody who had a severe anemia and was going to the best hematologist in Seattle, Dr. Goldberg. And they'd been working for some like 3 years. Every 3 months, she had to go in and have a transfusion because she was not making red blood cells. So she finally came to me and I started working on her. And I picked up some emotional stuff. I picked up some stuck trauma from surgery. Those had to be cleared first. And then I worked on bringing the body back to what it knew how to do, was to make those cells. Her red blood count started stabilizing. She'd go in for a blood test, didn't need a transfusion. So she kept going back in every period of time, didn't need any transfusions, and he finally said after 2 years, you know, don't worry about it, you don't need to come back in here. And she said, but what if I start getting exhausted, or if I don't know my blood count's down, or whatever? And he said, if you start feeling not so good, go to your healer first. And I've worked with several people with him. I worked with a woman with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma who had a relapse and had a stem cell transplant. And there was a small group of us there. We prayed over the stem cells and we did all kinds of stuff and spent a lot of time in the hospital on that one. When her stem cells came back 48 hours faster than they were supposed to, and they just went shoo, shoo, shoo. It was really exciting. She is 4 years out from the transplant now. She's never had a secondary infection. She has she just had her CAT scan again every 6 months. She has absolutely no sign of disease anywhere. And these are unusual physical situations where the return of health is not always assured. But I like to work with everything possible. If someone's ill, let's bring in everything that's possible. Let's, the thought of a team here of people doing spiritual healing and the best of medical science just makes so much sense to me.
Do you communicate ever directly with the infinite intelligence that's in the cells?
Yeah, you can find it going deep in and you find it going way out.
Does it tell you you're open and receptive to that? And does it give you the answer in what direction to go?
It's interesting. My experience, my internal experience, is not so much the information in the cell talking to me as the information that's bigger, that's universal, working through me to the cell. But I also believe that the cell has its own consciousness. It just hasn't worked that way for me personally.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about the spiral feeling?
Can you tell me what more you want, where you want me to go with the spiral?
To get the energy.
The energy down? I just like things that fit with what seem to be true in science. And that's how the spiral came to be. And I love the feeling of light and moving, not just static energy, but moving, and moving in a way that's natural, both universally and to the cells. So the spiral has felt like it connects with inside really well. There's a couple other spiral stories. An electron that flows from any source to ground spirals. That's how the electron microscope works. Works on the wavelength of a very tiny spiral of this electron going from a tungsten source to ground. It's like, whoa, that's really amazing. In the human organism, probably any mammal, when the embryo gets to a certain size, it starts twisting. Something in it, there's no muscles there yet at all, start a torque, and a little group of cells that's going to form the pancreas get dropped off. A little group of cells that's going to form the liver get dropped off. Anything that's not bilaterally symmetrical, you only have a pancreas on one side, you have liver on one side, is deposited by an embryo that's spinning, that's in a torque. So there's so much in the natural world about spirals. That's why I thought, well, let's try this. Plus, the Sufis do a dance. In ecstasy, they're spinning around and around. And if you've ever tried it, just going into meditation and starting to move in a spinning way, it's really very cool. So, I don't know what else I can say. I would just encourage you to use it. Try it out.
The wide opening up or?
The way I experience is up and going clockwise to my body. And I usually like it gold light and bring it down through my body. And then if I got a cold, I'll pull a little spiral down and go, all right, into my throat. It's just an image. It's just an adjunct to help you get to a sense of energy. But one of the beliefs I come to is that I like to operate on as few beliefs as possible. And that if I no longer invest magic in anything. When I started working, I learned everything there was about crystals. If I did a hospital call, I carried my bag of crystals. Now I knew this crystal and that crystal, this one did this and this one did that, and this prayer did this and this motion did that. When I work now, I do 3 things. I connect with the universe, with God, the divine. I clear the body. I can tell when it's blocked, I clear the body. And then I deepen the healing to where it's called for and where it's needed. That's it. I was telling Diane earlier, early on, I learned the chakras, and I thought, okay, we're going to do red in the first chakra, and orange in the second chakra. And I'd start doing this chakra balancing on people on the table, and they'd get nauseated. I'm going, what is going on here? So my guide said, well, take a look inside these bodies. I went, okay. Open the body, and here's a core energy lying right above the spine. It's pure silver. Now, so what's this mean? What kind of metaphor is this? I was collecting people who had really high energies, for whom some of the earth colors actually made them physically ill, was not good for them. And so I started just doing chakra balancing, waves of silver energy for this person. She was so chemically sensitive, she could barely live alive on this earth. And then slowly, as she got better, I started wrapping red with silver. And she could eventually get other colors in her body so that she could, live in the world. She eventually went on to school, got her degree. She's now a Jungian analyst. Yes. So you will be guided, you will be instructed, but I've never worked the same way with 2 people in 20 years. Every individual that comes and every session with every individual is different. And part of the deal is that you show up totally present to whoever is in front of you and listen for guidance. You can't develop a technique and then just run it. I remember once I was telling somebody about how excited I was of learning to work with colors. And they said, well, then all you need is just a lamp with a filter. You lay the person on the table and you put the filter in and you go off and have a cup of coffee. I said, I don't think it works that way. Any other questions?
When I've done energy healing or spiritual healing, I consider myself like a writer. And that I'm not actually the one doing the healing, because my intent, and my husband has noticed, my eyes become different. And when people feel, now I can't do what you can do, sense which part of the body, is ailing them. But either they'll feel tremendous heat, or tremendous cold, or like electricity flowing through their body. And one man, his hair stood up straight on his head, actually. But I was curious to know if you have the same things occurring.
Okay, number one, I know this isn't my energy. If it was, I'd be half dead at the end of the day. It's not my energy. And yet I am there. And so early on, I thought of myself as a funnel, which may be kind of like the wire, and I just, showed up and poured the energy. Well, my guides didn't let me get on with that. They said, you are co-creating. You are responsible for what you say to this person and what you do. And so, for me, there was a challenge to step up to a different model that together I was given to work with this person, but that I was also very much involved in what was going on. It was not me doing the work, but there's another complexity past just funneling it to them.
Oh, yeah, of course, you have to have a feeling of love for them, or it means nothing.
Right. And then you get guidance to whatever you do or say.
Guides, would you expound upon that? How did they come to you, and how?
That's a good story. I'd heard about guides. And this first healing teacher I had, I'd been through all of his classes, and he said I had to take the spinal exam. So I went over to his healing room, and he was an interesting guy. He'd been a healer since he was a little kid, 5 years old. And he was an interesting guy. So he lays down on the table and he says, the exam is, I'm going to go screw up my body, and I'm going to go out of my body, and you have got to bring me back and fix it. And if you don't, I'll die. Yeah, right, you know?
That's a final exam.
I was pretty much in awe of this guy, you know, so I bought that hook, line, and sinker. So he's laying on the table. He was a very dramatic person, and he looks like he's having a convulsion. He's jerking and shaking and all this stuff, and then he's like, and I thought, I think I should call 911. I really did. So I'm going, oh, yikes. So I start just kind of doing my thing, and this odd voice comes out of him. It's not his voice at all, and it's not him, and it says, well, I wouldn't do that if I were you. So it turned out this was a healing guy named Sanjili. And we just had the best of times. And I say, well, now I think I'm going to do this. He said, well, that's a good idea. Try that. Oh, yeah, well, you know. So it was this incredible conversation. The first time I really had a lot of vitality around working with a guy. Well, then, this particular healer, for some reason, didn't want to listen to Sanjili. He kind of kept calling him to clean up his act around some other areas in his life. And Sanjili started working with me, and he would instruct me. I would go into a deep trance, have a friend who had questions, and she would ask, and then I'd get information back. And so I got a lot of direct information early on. And then other guides showed up. And I would go to the Philippines, and a guide would show up. And I'd go to Bali, and one would show up. I'm just back from a couple weeks in Mexico visiting my daughter. We spent some time in the Yucatan, and I met somebody at one of the Mayan ruins. And so I've seen them physically a couple of times. I've seen angels a couple of times physically with my eyes. So I don't know all the ins and outs of guides and angels, but I know that there are beings who come and help us out and instruct us, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for them. One little story about that, one day, it was probably at least 10, 12 years ago, was walking my Savoia before the one that you saw on that picture, down a steep hill in Seattle, and it had rained a little bit. The street was wet, but there was, thunder and lightning is pretty rare for us out there. Happens once in a while, but not like it does here for you folks. I'm walking down the street, and there's a power line above my head, ways above, going across, and all of a sudden there's this huge crack of thunder, and I saw a bolt of lightning strike that power line and make a plasma right above my head. And I just went, yikes. And I turned around and I looked up on the hill, and here was a little old Asian man. And I said to him, did you see that? And he said, somehow or other, yes, lightning struck just above your head. And I looked back down and the dog was fine, and I looked back up and he was gone. And it was at a time when I was saying, I need a sign. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Is this healing work working? Am I supposed to do this? And I went, okay, no more signs. Thank you very much. It has not been an easy road. In 20 years, you go through a lot of stuff. There certainly have been days when I thought that I was just delusional. And then other days when you're just skipping across the ice going, how lucky could I possibly be to have fallen into being able to do this work? And that's where it is most of the days. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I say, I am grateful for breath today. Show me what today is about.
This is a little personal, so feel free. Well, I know you had a baby and a daughter in your size. Has there been a partner, a man with you during all of this? And what do you think of these folks?
My dear partner connected with me when I was a scientist. So at a certain point, after the NDE and after all of these changes, it just didn't work, as happens to many people. And so I'm very grateful for him in my life. He certainly needed to be my daughter's daddy, and we are friends. But at this point, I'm single, and at 63, I'm actually grateful because I know I've got some work to do that, for right now, a relationship would be a distraction. And I actually have a couple of nice friends who take me out and go on dates, and I'm going, it's really nice you live in your place and I live in mine. So I'm not like, oh, you can't do relationship if you're a healer at all. But I have been through some of the challenges and difficulties of, you know, this whole trip. You kind of don't fit anymore.
Do you ever find that you get information about past lives when you're working with people and how that plays into the healing process?
I'm not a specialist in that area. Some people are. For some people, that's their thing. But there are times when someone will come in and it's really clear that their healing issue is about a past life. And when that's the case, then I'll either do a regression with them so they can get it, or, you know, there's a number of different ways of working with them. And indeed, there are times, I believe, when there's nothing about what's going on now that relates to it, but truly a past life is crucial to clear up for their health. Pardon?
Do you live in Seattle?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm curious about the experience itself. Like, what happened? Did somebody find you, or did you just wake up, and did you tell other people about it right away, or?
Good question. I was all by myself, and it was before I met John, before I met Annalise's dad, and I actually just moved to Seattle. I hadn't been there very long. And my father grew up on a ranch in Idaho, and he nearly died when he was a teenager, apparently, because he had appendicitis and the thing burst, and they hauled him off to a hospital to die. Well, somebody pulled him through. So I'm saying that because the background of my family was the only reason you never go get medical help is if you were dying and they could just sort of bury you. So here I had this big gash in my head. I was feeling really weird and dingy. But, you know, so I kind of toughed it out over the weekend, and happened on a Friday night. Went to work on Monday, and my colleagues looked at me and said, "You look like hell, what happened to you?" So they hauled me off to one of the physicians they knew, and I had no toe curl on one side, and they did a CAT scan. I had to be flat on my back for a while. I had never been really sick. I had never had to stop. I never could just go like that and be up and going again. And I couldn't read because it hurt. I couldn't listen to music because music hurt. I couldn't, nothing. I had to be with myself, and that was really tough. And with being with myself, I was trying to process these incredible images and stuff that didn't fit with my beliefs. I didn't believe in an afterlife. I didn't believe in all this stuff. So it was a very incredible time for me. And as I said, as I was recovering, I ran into Ray Moody's first book, which was truly a blessing. And then all this other stuff happened.
Thank you especially for coming and sharing what it's like to blend science and healing so beautifully.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hi. What is the criteria for finding a healer in an area?
Oh, that's another really good question. What's the criteria for finding a healer? I guess my advice would be to just go deeply into meditation and ask to be guided to somebody that is the person that can help you. And then kind of trust your instincts with it. You know, you can write a list of well, they should do da-da-da-da, but none of that really floats completely. And I truly believe in guidance, and that you'll bump up against the, you know, there's a whole bunch of healers in this room as they went around. So you want to see where you connect. One of the beliefs I have is that each of us as healers has a community we can help. We can't help everybody, but there's a community we can help. And so there's room for every healer in the world because each of us attract different people. And you know, there's jokes about healers who like to say, well, you know, I healed somebody's big toe that was smashed. Or, well, I healed somebody, they've been dead for a day and I resurrected them. You know, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't float.
How important was the cross-cultural experience for you?
Cross-cultural experience was incredibly important. It broke down all kinds of barriers for me of judgments about the way people worship. Like in Valley, people were not Christian. They had never heard about Christianity, and yet the devotion to God and the clarity of their heart was so pure. And so I just went, there are a ton of different paths to God. He draws us all in some way or another. I also learned, well, let me give you a little story to illustrate it. This is a Balinese story. In the Philippines, I was working with somebody, and the healer was talking to this young woman who came up from Manila in Baguio. And at the end of the session, and they spoke only Tagalog, I didn't know what they were saying, she said to me, I have always hated Americans. And you're a Filipino. I said, okay. In Bali, I was with a fabulous master meditating with him. And he was totally Hindu. And the energy was so sweet and exquisite. All our eyes were closed, we were just doing this meditation, and the tears started pouring down my face. Sometimes when you're close to that energy, it really touches you emotionally, you know that. All of a sudden, he stops everything. And he leans over through the translator and says to me, you are very close to God. How can that be? You're a tourist. The accidental. This is my slide saver. These are all pictures that are in my thing. That last one you saw was a high-speed Q-switch laser that I used in research to disrupt pigment cells. It was a state-of-the-art, delivered its pulse in 6 nanoseconds. It's really cool stuff.
I'm trying to hear two things from you. One, you were talking about cases where you need people that have illnesses, but then you're saying you have the ability to look inside the body and do. So do you have people that just come to you and they don't really know what's wrong and there's no medical stuff, they just figure it out?
Repeat the question.
She wanted to know, she said she's heard two things. One where people come and they say, I've got this owie and that owie. And where people come who don't know what they have and if I diagnose. I do very little of the diagnostics, but what I know is that often what people present with is not what the problem is. And that often my job is to steer them to what it is. Example, woman came to me, she'd set up an appointment. She was coming more for spiritual counseling. And on the weekend, she'd broken her leg skiing. So she comes hobbling in with a cast on. So we do our little chat thing. She lays down on the table and I start working above the cast. And every time I go over it, I can tell where the break is. I can still feel it. And I knew the bone wasn't set right. I could see it with my eyes. I could see that the bone was offset. And I went, she doesn't know me. She doesn't trust me. What am I going to tell her? Her bone isn't set right. But I couldn't get away from it. It was such an insistent truth. I couldn't dismiss it. So at the end of the session, I said to her, yada, 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 you don't know me, yada, 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 yada. Please go have this thing re-x-rayed and check it out. It wasn't set properly. She was a professional athlete, not a skier, but a professional athlete. She had to go back in, have surgery, have the thing redone, and a pin put in, and she healed fine. But if she hadn't, the consequences would have been really bad. So there are times when it's absolutely imperatively clear to me that there's some information that's important. And I've learned the feeling of it when it's true, and I always tell it. And there are the times when I say, I can't read this, it's gray, I don't know. And I recommend you go blah, 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 blah. You know, go see your physician. I will not work with a cancer patient who is not teamed up with a physician. I will not work with someone who says, I've got diabetes and I'm gonna drop my insulin and you're gonna fix me. I said, this is not realistic. We need to work together on stuff. And so, I mean, in 20 years of time, you get kind of reamed out and honed. But again, as I said earlier, I really believe that the combination of all of the healing arts and skills are really important. And there are times when stuff pops up that nobody would have thought of, and then people will go and get diagnostic work, and it turns out to be true. I know when I feel pushed and my ego wants to say, well, I know what's wrong with you, and I don't go there anymore. So, but I know when the message is clear and it will be true. We are just about time for out of here.
Do you work with people who have emotional, mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, that sort of thing?
I do. Earlier in the practice, I did more of that. As the healing gift has become stronger in me, I do more and more work in the physical realm. But I do some of that also, and there are many other healers in our area who are good at that. But I do work with those things. Depression in particular, especially if it's like a spiritual malaise. Sometimes straight out frank mental illness I can help with also. Like a biochemical illness that's within the brain. But it's tricky because, you know, people are managed on medication, and it's way too risky to go off the medication. How do you measure? How do you know that they're feeling better? We addressed this a little bit earlier. Often people will know that things are shifting inside, and so that if they'll work with a doctor that will work with them to help monitor it, then we're off and running.
Would you refuse someone who will not go to counseling and take medication that he needs, yet might come to you? I have someone in mind.
On a case-by-case basis, but generally I would refuse them.
I've tried for so long. I work with animals, a good question. Many abused, abandoned. In terms of their healing, sometimes it takes me many months. We don't always know the history of the animal. And I'm just wondering, how this might translate. Is there a better way than what I'm doing? Just constant patience, compassion.
Good question. I
don't know how sometimes to deal with something.
I do work with animals also, and I have a therapy dog in my practice. My Samoyed is, I trained him, and he is registered therapy dog. So he works in the practice with me. And people bring cats, and I've even worked on horses and all sorts of things. But with an abused animal, the compassion and patience to bring them out of that is an enormous job. It's just a big job you're doing. So, and it does take time.
But is there any way to facilitate anything you can think of to communicate in terms of communication? Beyond, because we don't have the commonality of, language, quote unquote. No way to,
The only thing that occurs to me, what occurs to me is to open your mind and ask them to communicate to you in pictures or in knowing. And say, I want to help you in just your mind to them, and I need more information from you. Please work with me and see if that shifts it, rather than to be puzzled.
how would I know if it's you?
you'll tell. You'll see results faster. Let me tell you a dog story. Somebody brought a dog to me that was a wolf cross, and it was a one-person dog, and it had a heart defect, and they were going to have to put it down. And I couldn't work with it in my office at the time because of people with allergies that would come. So I had to go sit in the back of a Volkswagen with this dog. And it was a one-person dog, so I slid in. This dog had really big teeth. And it was not a friendly, oh, I'm so glad to see you. It's just looking at me. So I put my hand on its chest, and I did my stuff, and it would tolerate me. And then at some point, it went, "Rrrr," and I went, okay, this session is done. Goodbye, thank you very much. And then I came back, and the next time, wagged his tail a little bit. It was happy to see me. It licked my hand, put my hand on its chest, working away on its heart for however long, and the dog goes, "Rrrr." I can't remember how long we did this, several months probably 6, 7 sessions. She took the dog to the vet. Absolutely no evidence of a heart defect. Dog lived a full, long, happy life. And every time I would see it, it would come up, lick my hand, wag its tail, but not for a long time, It was fun. One time I was called, somebody drove me out north of Seattle to a big grassy field where there was a horse with a sore leg. And I walked out across this field. The person was not with me. And I'm out there, there's no trees, there's nothing to climb, the fence is a long way away, and here's this horse standing there with its legs. So I crouched down on my haunches, working on the leg, and I hear a growl behind me. And I turn my head. Here's a gigantic Rottweiler standing right behind my neck, growling at me. And I went, well, now what are we going to do? So I just started talking to the dog, slowly turned around, got up, and it starts going like this. This dog wanted energy. So I just started running energy down its back, and it's just wiggling, and off it goes. That's all it wanted. Oh, thank you very much. And the horse's leg got fine. This is another one of these. You healers I know this. You get called in on stuff that's the last-ditch effort. Oh, we're going to have to kill this horse tomorrow if you don't fix it. And in fact, that one worked. One of the interesting things about working with animals is it's not a placebo effect. You're not dealing with a psychological state. You're dealing with, does it work or it doesn't work? And so I rather like that challenge. Questions back there?
Colleen has a question.
I wanted to ask you, I've tried to use every form of protection technique, grounding and prayer. I'm not a healer, but I had went through the dark tunnel and the light tunnel, so my energy field is completely open, and I'm not having a good time with it at all.
I hear it.
can feel other people's pain and suffering. I can't be in a room very much with people. I'll be just walking somewhere and things will start channeling through me. It's just too strange for me.
A really good question and a good one to finish with. I had the same thing, and I still, when I open to read somebody, I feel it in my body. That's one of the ways I know I'm on track, because I'll get a physical sensation in my body. And once I do, I just back up. I don't let it go any further. But I tried at the beginning all different kinds of protection techniques. I did Tibetan once, where you stand there and you go like this. And at the end of your elbow, it's supposed to be safe. Well, that didn't work. And then I did, everything you could think of. When I finally, the message was, let me backtrack again. Somebody gave me a Tibetan text that had been translated. And I've never seen it anywhere again, but the instruction was to their healers on how to pull pain into their body, but not to keep it. They pull it into this light space that's developed by meditation in their heart, and it vaporizes whatever is there. I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. And then I discovered that my own meditation practice, my own attention to my connection and devotion, built that area so that the pain that came would simply move. it wouldn't stay with me. I still have to, at times, the image I use is like turning a rheostat down, or the knob on your stove. If I'm getting too much from other people, I just go, okay, I'm just turning this down. I don't need this right now. Ask the guides to help me. But when I do get stuff, I either go into meditation or I gather it with my hands. I'm very kinesthetic. Gather it with my hands and I give it to God. I go, my job is not to keep this and hold it, because I can't help the person by holding it. If I could, I would, but it doesn't work. So I give it to the divine, and it clears me. I also run off to the mountains every other weekend. I immerse myself in the wilderness of northern Washington and hike in the woods and sit by the Nooksack River, which runs right off of a glacier. And so I'm very attentive to renewal, and the earth is real important to me. So I have ways of renewing when I feel like I've gotten clobbered, or if I'm overly tired, or if I'm seeing too many people, or something where I take on more than I should, then I have those kind of backup resources. And I'll also have a few buddies that we'll get together and meditate or work on each other, which helps a lot. So that's kind of a long way around, but the answer is I have not found one way to deal with that. It is part of the experience, it's part of the commitment to be here on the earth as a healer, and that you don't have to keep it, you don't have to carry it, you can release it. Okay, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. We will be going to Ruby's for dinner, if anybody wants to head over that direction. We're glad to see you over there.